stop right there. You're not leaving with that cart.
I've paid. I have the receipt. You have no reason to detain me.
Manager says the cart's stolen. Hand it over now.
You are escalating without probable cause. That's unlawful.
You don't tell me how to do my
Federal
job.
civil rights prosecutor. Touch
And this
me.
becomes your
Turn
case.
Officer Kyle Richter had been with the Metro Police Department for 6 years when he walked into Iron and Oak Home Supply and made a decision that would not only end his career, but also cost the county $6.5 million in damages. He was 29 years old, aggressive, and entirely confident that his badge gave him the final word in every argument. On a bright Saturday morning, he responded to a call about a suspect using a stolen credit card to purchase high-end building materials. The suspect was Marcus Sterling, a 54-year-old senior federal prosecutor for the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. What Richter did next, ignoring the law, mocking a man of superior legal standing, and arresting a federal official in front of a store full of witnesses, would become a definitive case study in how unchecked arrogance and implicit bias can dismantle a police force's reputation overnight. Before we get into the details of this catastrophic failure of judgment, tell us in the comments, do you think police officers should be personally liable for civil rights violations? If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We bring you the stories that the system tries to bury. Marcus Sterling was not a man who sought attention. At 54, he carried himself with the quiet, heavy gravity of a man who had spent 25 years in the trenches of the American legal system. He was a legend within the Department of Justice. He had prosecuted hate crimes in the Deep South, dismantled human trafficking rings in the Midwest, and put corrupt mayors and police chiefs behind bars from coast to coast. His colleagues described him as a legal surgeon, precise, unemotional, and devastatingly effective. He didn't raise his voice because he never had to. His words carried the weight of federal law. On this particular Saturday, however, Marcus Sterling was just a homeowner. He was off the clock. He had recently purchased a 1920s craftsman home that he was restoring himself a passion project to clear his mind from the darkness he saw in his case files. He arrived at Iron and Oak Home Supply at 10:15 a.m., dressed in a pair of clean, dark denim jeans, a pressed navy polo shirt, and sturdy work boots. He looked like exactly what he was, a successful middle-aged man running errands. He spent 45 minutes in the store carefully selecting lumber high-grade copper piping and vintage-style light fixtures. He pushed his heavy cart with purpose, nodding politely to other customers. He spoke to no one other than the floor associate who helped him load the lumber. But in the eyes of one person watching from the management booth, Sterling's presence was inherently suspicious. This wasn't about what Sterling was doing. It was about who he was. Iron and Oak Home Supply was the kind of establishment that prided itself on exclusive clientele. Located in an affluent suburb just outside the city limits, it catered to contractors and wealthy homeowners who didn't blink at paying premium prices for domestic hardwoods and imported fixtures. The air smelled of sawdust and money. Brett Holloway was the store manager. At 28 years old, he had been promoted quickly, mostly due to his father's connections with the franchise owner rather than any genuine aptitude for leadership. Holloway was the type of manager who spent more time watching the security monitors than helping customers. He considered himself the first line of defense against what he called the wrong element. When Marcus Sterling rolled his cart up to the contractor's desk, Holloway was watching from his glass-walled office. He saw a black man with a cart full of merchandise totaling over $3,500. He saw the premium copper piping a high-theft item. He saw the expensive fixtures. And in Holloway's mind, the math didn't work. To him, Sterling didn't look like the contractors he was used to, nor did he look like the residents of the gated communities nearby. Sterling pulled out a sleek black metal credit card, the kind reserved for high-net-worth individuals. He handed it to the cashier, a young woman who smiled and began processing the transaction. Holloway didn't wait. He picked up the phone and dialed the police non-emergency line, his eyes fixed on Sterling through the glass. "I need an officer at Iron and Oak immediately." Holloway set his voice tight with self-importance. I have a suspect in the store attempting to use a stolen credit card for a massive purchase. The dispatcher asked the standard questions. Do you have proof the card is stolen? He's buying nearly $4,000 worth of copper and lumber. Holloway scoffed. And the card doesn't match the appearance. He's looking nervous. I need someone here before he walks out with the merchandise. That was a lie. Sterling was standing perfectly still, checking emails on his phone while waiting for the receipt. He wasn't nervous, he was bored. But Holloway's bias filled in the blanks. The call went out. Officer Kyle Richter was 3 miles away, patrolling the highway. When the dispatch came through, possible fraud in progress, suspect on scene, Richter lit up his lights. Richter had a reputation in the precinct, though not the one he thought he had. His file contained 14 complaints in 6 years. Most involved discourtesy or unnecessary roughness. He was known for escalating traffic stops and treating every interaction as a challenge to his authority. His sergeant had warned him twice in the last year to dial it back. But Richter believed he was the only one doing real police work. To him, a fraud call was an opportunity to catch a bad guy in the act. He didn't care about investigation. He cared about apprehension. Officer Richter pulled his cruiser up to the curb of Iron and Oak at 11:08 a.m., tires crunching aggressively against the pavement. He didn't park in a spot. He left the car in the fire lane lights flashing, announcing his presence to the world. He adjusted his belt, checked his body camera to ensure it was on a requirement he often resented, and marched toward the automatic doors. Inside the store, the transaction was already complete. The cashier had handed Marcus Sterling his receipt. Thank you, sir. Drive around to the loading dock and the boys will load that lumber for you. Thank you, young lady. Sterling said, his voice a deep, calm baritone. He folded the receipt and placed it in his pocket, placing one hand on the handle of his cart. He had just taken his first step toward the exit when the automatic doors slid open and Officer Richter strode in. Richter didn't look for the manager. He didn't ask the cashier for details. He scanned the front of the store, saw the only black man at the counter with a loaded cart, and made a beeline for him. The store went silent. Customers in the paint aisle stopped mixing colors. The line at the returns desk froze. Richter walked up to Sterling, invading his personal space, immediately stopping less than 2 feet away. He placed a hand on his holster, not drawing, but signaling dominance. Where do you think you're going with all that? Richter demanded, his voice echoing off the high warehouse ceilings. Sterling stopped. He looked at the officer, his expression unreadable. He had cross-examined murderers and dismantled syndicates. A 29-year-old patrol officer with an attitude problem did not intimidate him. I am going to my vehicle, Sterling said calmly. I've just purchased these items. Is that right? Richter sneered. Manager says the card's stolen. Let me see it. Sterling didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice. He simply looked Richter in the eye. The card is mine. The transaction is cleared. I have the receipt right here. I didn't ask for a receipt. I said let me see the card and your ID. Now. Officer, Sterling said, shifting his stance slightly to face him fully, I am under no legal obligation to provide identification to you unless I am being detained for a suspected crime. Do you have reasonable, articulable suspicion that I have committed a crime, or are you acting on a hunch? Richter's face flushed red. He wasn't used to suspects quoting the law. He was used to fear. He was used to submission. You want to play lawyer fine. You're detained. Suspected credit card fraud and theft. Now give me the ID or you're going in cuffs. This is a mistake, Sterling said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder. I am asking you to pause and think. I am a senior federal prosecutor. My credentials are in my back pocket. If you reach for your handcuffs, you are violating my civil rights under color of law. The air in the store was thick with tension. Brett Holloway, the manager, had come out of his office and was standing near the customer service desk. Arms crossed, a smug look of vindication on his face. Several customers had their phones out recording. Richter laughed. It was a short, sharp bark of disbelief. Federal prosecutor? Yeah, right. And I'm the police commissioner. You guys always have a story. It is not a story, Sterling said. It is a fact. Verify it. Call your watch commander. Do not touch me. Richter had heard enough. In his mind, this was a classic delay tactic. The suspect was arrogant, defiant, and making a scene. Richter stepped forward, grabbing Sterling's left wrist and twisting it behind his back with force that was entirely unnecessary for a compliant subject. Turn around, Richter shouted. Sterling didn't fight. He didn't pull away. He knew that any physical resistance, no matter how slight, would be used to justify further violence. He allowed his arm to be twisted, wincing slightly as the joint was torqued. I am not resisting, Sterling announced, clearly looking directly at the nearest smartphone camera. I am complying with this officer's unlawful orders. I am Marcus Sterling, United States Department of Justice. I am being arrested without probable cause. Shut up. Richter slammed Sterling against the checkout counter. The sound of Sterling's chest hitting the metal echoed through the store. Stop resisting. I am not resisting. Sterling repeated, his face pressed against the cold countertop. Richter yanked Sterling's other arm back and slapped the handcuffs on. He ratcheted them tight, too tight. The metal bit into Sterling's wrists. Richter patted him down, roughly pulling the wallet from his back pocket. He opened it, glanced at the badge and the federal ID card inside, and scoffed. Nice printer you got, Richter said, tossing the wallet onto the counter like it was trash. Looks almost real. You can explain it to the judge. That is federal property you just discarded, Sterling said. You are currently in violation of Title 18 United States Code Section 242. You are depriving me of my rights under color of law. This carries a prison sentence, officer. You have the right to remain silent, Richter recited loudly, enjoying the theater of it. So use it. He grabbed Sterling by the arm and marched him toward the exit. Holloway, the manager, nodded at Richter as they passed. Thanks, officer. Good work. No problem, Richter said. We got him. Sterling said nothing more. He walked with his head high despite the handcuffs. He was no longer a shopper. He was a prosecutor building a case. He was memorizing timestamps. He was noting the lack of Miranda warning regarding the interrogation. He was cataloging the excessive force. He was preparing to destroy Officer Richter's life not with violence but with the absolute crushing weight of the law. The ride to the precinct took 20 minutes. Officer Richter spent the first 10 minutes on his radio bragging to dispatch. One male in custody. Fraud resisting possession of forged government documents. Yeah, he had a fake Fed badge. Real piece of work. In the back seat, Marcus Sterling sat in silence. The pain in his wrists was sharp, but he pushed it aside. He focused on the reflection of the officer's eyes in the rearview mirror. He saw arrogance. He saw a man who had never been told no. You're quiet now, Richter said, glancing back. Ran out of legal advice. Sterling stared straight ahead. I am waiting for your supervisor. You'll be waiting a long time, pal. You're going to booking. When they arrived at the precinct, Richter pulled Sterling out of the car and paraded him through the back entrance. He walked him past the holding cells and up to the intake desk. The desk sergeant on duty was Thomas Miller, a 58-year-old veteran who had seen everything. He was 2 years from retirement, tired, and possessed a nose for trouble. He looked up as Richter shoved Sterling toward the counter. What do we have, Richter? Miller asked, his voice weary. Credit card fraud at Iron and Oak, resisting, and look at this. Richter tossed Sterling's wallet onto the high desk. Carrying a forged federal badge. Guy claims he's a prosecutor. Sergeant Miller picked up the wallet. He opened it. He looked at the badge, the heavy gold shield of the Department of Justice. He looked at the ID card with its holographic seal and the signature of the Attorney General. Miller had worked joint task forces with the feds back in the 90s. He knew what a fake looked like. This was not a fake. Miller felt a cold drop of sweat slide down his spine. He looked at the name on the ID, Marcus A. Sterling, Senior Prosecutor, Civil Rights Division. Miller froze. He knew that name. Every cop who paid attention to the news knew that name. Sterling was the man who had indicted the entire corrupt narcotics squad in the neighboring county 3 years ago. Miller looked up at Sterling. The man in handcuffs was staring at him with a gaze that could cut glass. "Sergeant," Sterling said calmly, "please check the database, and then please call your watch commander." Miller looked at Richter. "Richter, did you verify these?" "I didn't have to verify them, Sarge. Look at the guy. He was buying copper piping with a black card. It's obviously a prop." "You idiot," Miller whispered. The color drained from his face. "Richter, take the cuffs off, now." "What no? He's a suspect." "I said, take them off," Miller roared, standing up and slamming his hand on the desk. "Do you know who this is? This is Marcus Sterling. He's not a fake. He's the head of the Federal Civil Rights Task Force for this district." Richter blinked. "What?" "Uncuff him." Miller came around the desk, keys in hand, shoving Richter aside. "Sir, I apologize. I don't know what happened here." Miller unlocked the cuffs. Sterling rubbed his wrists. Deep red grooves were etched into his dark skin. He didn't say thank you. He didn't smile. "Do not apologize for him, Sergeant," Sterling said. "I want his badge number. I want the body camera footage secured immediately. And I want Lieutenant Vance down here, now." Richter stood there, his mouth slightly open. "Wait. It's real." Sterling turned to him slowly. "The fake badge you threw on the counter?" "Yes. And the man you assaulted. He is the man who is going to ensure you never wear a uniform again." The atmosphere in the precinct shifted from routine bureaucracy to absolute panic within seconds. Sergeant Miller was already on the phone, his voice hushed and urgent, summoning the lieutenant. Other officers in the booking area, realizing something catastrophic was unfolding, slowly backed away or busied themselves with paperwork, desperate to not be involved. Lieutenant Vance, the watch commander, burst through the double doors 3 minutes later. He was a man of 45 sharp and political who understood the precarious nature of community relations. One look at Marcus Sterling, a man he had seen give press conferences on national television, standing by the intake desk, rubbing his bruised wrists, and Vance knew the department was in a nightmare scenario. "Mr. Sterling," Vance said, approaching with his hands open in a gesture of peace. "I am Lieutenant Vance. I am incredibly sorry for this misunderstanding. Please come to my office. Let's get you some water, some ice for those wrists." Sterling didn't move. He stood his ground in the center of the booking room, ensuring every officer present could hear him. "This is not a misunderstanding, Lieutenant," Sterling said, his voice projecting clearly. "This is an unlawful arrest. This is false imprisonment. This is assault on a federal officer. And it was motivated by racial bias." "Sir, I assure you, you can assure me of nothing." Sterling cut him off. He pointed a long finger at Officer Richter, who was now standing in the corner looking pale and small. "That officer refused to verify my identification. He refused to articulate reasonable suspicion. He used excessive force on a compliant subject. And he told me that my federal credentials were fake because, in his view, a black man could not possibly hold this office." Richter tried to speak up. "Lieutenant, he was acting suspicious at the store. The manager said—" "Quiet," Vance snapped at Richter. "Not another word." Sterling turned his gaze back to Vance. "I am not going to your office. I am not drinking your water. I am formally notifying you that I am pressing charges. I want that man's badge and sidearm taken from him, right now, in front of me." Vance hesitated. Procedurally, this was irregular, but legally, he was looking at a federal prosecutor who had been wrongfully shackled. "Do it," Sterling said, "or I will make the obstruction charge include you." Vance turned to Richter. He looked tired. "Richter, badge and gun. Put them on the desk." "Lou, come on." Richter pleaded, his voice cracking.
I was just doing my job. You arrested a U.S. attorney for shopping, Richter. Give me the gear. Richter's hands shook as he unbuckled his belt. He unclipped his holster and placed the heavy Glock on the counter. Then he unpinned the silver badge from his chest. The sound of it hitting the laminate surface was the only sound in the room. You are placed on administrative leave effective immediately pending an internal affairs investigation, Vance said. Go home. Sterling watched Richter walk out the door stripped of his authority. Then he turned to Vance. Secure the evidence, Lieutenant. My team will be in touch on Monday. And tell your chief to expect a call from the Attorney General. Sterling picked up his wallet, checked that his badge was undamaged, and walked out of the precinct. He hailed a cab back to the hardware store to get his car. He didn't look back. By Monday morning, the story wasn't just local news. It was a national firestorm. A customer in the store had uploaded the video to social media on Saturday night. The clip, titled, "Cop Arrests Innocent Man for Shopping While Black," had 4 million views by Sunday noon. It showed everything: Sterling's calm demeanor, his clear statement of his rights, his offer of ID, and Richter's sneering dismissal. It showed the violent twist of the arm and the slamming of the prosecutor against the counter. But the real bombshell dropped when the identity of the suspect was revealed. Headlines screamed across the internet: Civil rights prosecutor arrested by racist cop. Department of Justice official handcuffed buying lumber. On Tuesday, Marcus Sterling filed a federal lawsuit. It was a masterclass in legal drafting. He didn't just sue Officer Richter. He sued the city, the police department, and Iron and Oak Home Supply. The lawsuit alleged violations of the 4th and 14th Amendments, false arrest battery, and defamation. But because Sterling was who he was, he went further. He used his knowledge of the system to demand the discovery of documents that normally stay hidden. He subpoenaed Officer Richter's entire disciplinary history. It revealed 18 prior complaints, 12 of them from black men alleging harassment. All had been dismissed by Internal Affairs as unfounded. He subpoenaed the 911 calls from Iron and Oak Home Supply. The records showed that Brett Holloway, the manager, had called the police on black customers 6 times in the last 8 months. None of those calls had resulted in a conviction. One was for a man looking at tools for too long. Another was for a woman opening a box to check the contents. The deposition of Brett Holloway was brutal. Sterling's legal team, his own colleagues from private practice, dissected the manager. Mr. Holloway, the attorney asked, what specific behavior made you believe Mr. Sterling's credit card was stolen? Well, it was a lot of money, Holloway stammered. Do white contractors spend $3,500 in your store? Yes. Do you call the police on them? No, but he didn't look like a contractor. He didn't look like a contractor? Or did he not look white? Holloway had no answer. The silence was recorded for the jury. The police department tried to settle quickly. They offered $2 million. Sterling rejected it. He wasn't looking for a payday. He was looking for a precedent. He demanded a public admission of wrongdoing and a federal consent decree to overhaul the department's hiring and disciplinary practices. The city council, terrified of a public trial where a federal prosecutor would take the stand against their own police force, caved. The settlement was finalized 6 months later. The city agreed to pay Marcus Sterling $6.5 million in damages. Iron and Oak Home Supply settled separately for an undisclosed amount, rumored to be in the 7 figures. But the money was the least significant part of the outcome. Officer Kyle Richter was not just fired, he was decertified. The state board revoked his law enforcement license permanently. He would never carry a badge or a gun again. He was also charged criminally with assault and deprivation of rights under color of law. He pleaded guilty to avoid prison time, receiving 3 years of probation and a permanent felony record. Brett Holloway was terminated from Iron and Oak for violating the company's discrimination policy. His name became synonymous with racial profiling in the retail industry.
Marcus Sterling donated the entire $5 million settlement to a legal defense fund for indigent defendants, people who didn't have a badge or a law degree to protect them. In a rare interview after the settlement, Sterling sat in his finished living room, the copper piping he had been arrested for now installed behind the walls. He looked into the camera, his face somber. "Justice was served in my case," Sterling said quietly. "But let us be clear, I am an exception. I had the training to remain calm. I had the credentials to prove my status. I had the resources to fight back. If I had been a 19-year-old college student or a mechanic or a teacher, that officer might have broken my arm. He might have planted evidence. He might have ruined my life and no one would have known." He leaned forward, his hands clasped. "The system worked for me because I am part of the system. The tragedy is that for so many others, the system is a weapon, not a shield." It's a chilling thought to end on. If a man like Marcus Sterling, a man who represents the United States government, isn't safe from bias while buying lumber on a Saturday morning, who is? It forces us to ask, how many Officer Richters are still on patrol, and how many innocent people are sitting in cells right now because they didn't have a gold badge in their back pocket? What do you think needs to change to stop this from happening? Should police carry personal liability insurance? Should making a racially biased 911 call be a crime? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you believe these stories need to be told, please like and share. Stay safe. Look out for one another, and we'll see you in the next video.